Hello again. This is Roger Young with Life, Laughter, and Legacy. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, both the book and the movie. There are no spoilers, but I will tell you, if you want to read and witness by the big screen the life of a little girl who is abandoned, abused, neglected, and very lonely, and fortunately it does have a good ending, but that's all I'm going to say. But I was very profoundly affected by the book and the movie. I read the book 3 times over the last couple of years, and I think what really drew me to it and caused me to be so fascinated by it is the personal account of the fictional character Kaya Clark. Kaya, as a little girl, was a child in a home of several siblings, a mom and a dad, in the Deep South. And unfortunately, the father was very abusive. And at the time of the setting of the book, it is in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. And during that era, there just was not a lot of help for families that had such profound dysfunction. And so what happened was this little girl, who as a primary age child, witnessed firsthand the abuse of her mother and her siblings, violent actions by the father, who was an alcoholic. And the mother just did not know what to do. And unfortunately, she left the household. And when she walked out, Kaya, the little girl, saw her going down the path to what the mother thought was freedom. And she saw her hope just snatched away. If not in that moment, over the next few years, she would experience that, as one by one, her sisters and brother all left because they couldn't take the abuse. And there she was, all alone, in a place that was not in the middle of town by any means. It was in the marshlands next to the coast in the Carolinas. And this little girl, whose father was a veteran and must not have overcome the difficulties of the war, unfortunately took them out on his little girl until eventually he left while she was still a very young child. And there she was, called the Marsh Girl by the people in the community. And other than one person, and who was a person who was her age, and another couple known as Jumpin' and his wife, she was not showed any kindness. She was left to fend for herself, to learn how to feed herself, how to defend herself. And because she was so fearful, to avoid people that would hurt her, and she did that by running away. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give any spoilers out. But I will say this, that both the book and the movie really ring true for a lot of people in real life. Though a fictional account, I really think we can look into the soul of Delia Owens, who is the author of this book. She spent many years in the outback of Africa studying the wildlife, and talked through interviews that you can see on YouTube. She spoke of her profound loneliness, and eventually she and her husband would get divorced. And it's been in recent years that she moved to a community and has been more connected with society, especially as a result of the tremendous success of the book and now the movie, directed by Reese Witherspoon, I should say, produced. Outstanding. There are some deviations from the book and the storyline of the movie, but not enough to make anyone say it's not a good movie. And I think it was true to the book as much as it could be and covered enough of the details to cause the person viewing the movie to be profoundly affected about what it's like to experience abandonment, neglect, and abuse. Now let me share about my perspective, where I'm coming from on this. I spent many years as a pastor in many different facets, most predominantly as a children's pastor in several churches. And I think what the catalyst was for that in my life was the fact that I experienced what was absolute abandonment, not by people who were unkind to me, but people who did not have the resources of time, energy, and expertise to really take care of a young child. I had to parent my mother, who was experiencing obsessive compulsive disorder and schizophrenia. And so as a young child growing up in the 50s, I remember many times my mother having fits of rage or lying on the couch and just speaking incoherently, looking to me as my dad was working and my brother was in different homes, looking to me for help, and I was just a 4 or 5-year-old. Many times she asked me to pray for her, or just to hold her hand, or just be there for her. And so, as a child, I did everything I could. My brother and I were put in different homes, some acquaintances, some family, some relatives. Fortunately, the relatives loved us, but was not fully equipped to deal with myself and my brother who had the same difficulties as my mom, obsessive compulsive disorder and schizophrenia. I remember many times as he laid by my side in bed would whisper to himself and shake and tremble, and I would try to comfort him as best as I knew how. But I was just a child myself. My brother later on in life would get involved in crime and drugs, and fortunately for him, he met a woman that stayed by him through all of that. And he died not too many years ago as a result of all of the factors of living a very hard life. Fortunately, before he died, he accepted Christ. Fortunately, before both my parents passed, my mother, through good doctors and medical treatment, was able to enjoy more of a normal life. But the effects on me as a kid growing up in that environment would later play out through codependency. And fortunately, I married very well to a wife who loved me dearly and said, "Roger, we're just not going to be with this anymore. You're not going to allow you to be the hero for the world and surround yourself with people who are so dysfunctioning that they look to you for everything." And my wife and children both confronted me. And I realized I needed to get help, and I did. And I, with the help of a good counselor, also the advice of some friends, and a book by an author named Pat Springle, who wrote the book Codependency, A Christian Perspective. It profoundly affected me and helped me and enabled me to change from a lifestyle of being a codependent pastor to a person that became healthy in my lifestyle. And if and when signs of codependency and trying to be the savior would well up, my wife would say, "No, Roger, you're getting codependent." And the way that it played out in my life was I just did everything I could. If there was a deaf person, I learned American Sign Language and became adept and an interpreter. If it was a person having mental difficulties, I knew what to do to try to comfort them. But over time, I learned that I could not save everybody, and that the best way I could help people was by directing them to the professionals that could help them. And I want to say this to you: if you've read the book and you've seen the movie and you feel like it has dredged something up inside of you, I want to encourage you to seek help. There is help available. Maybe you were abandoned as a child. whether it was intentional or unintentional. Maybe circumstances just were such that the people in your life just couldn't meet those emotional needs. Maybe you were in a bad marriage, and or married to an alcoholic or a drug abuser or someone who was just abusive, whether it be through physical violence or emotional violence. I want to encourage you to get the help you need. And there is help available. So do I recommend the book Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens? Do I recommend the movie? Yes, I do. But if you find yourself triggered, maybe crying, maybe very upset, then I encourage you to look deep within yourself and see whether or not you need help and to get the help you need. But it's a good book. It's a good movie. Therefore, I recommend it. Thank you, and thanks again for tuning in to Life, Laughter, and Legacy with Roger Young and my perspective on Where the Crawdads Sing.